All right, let's dive into one of the most dramatic moments of the Cold War. We're talking about 1968, a year when a flicker of hope in Czechoslovakia, known as the Prague Spring, was brutally extinguished by Soviet tanks. It's a crucial story, so let's break it all down. And just to set the scene, listen to this. This isn't some high-up politician. This is a regular factory worker. You can just feel the despair in those words, right? This captures the mood perfectly. People felt like the system wasn't just broken, it was actively stealing their future.
So why was everyone so unhappy? What was bubbling under the surface that led to this explosion? Let's get into the causes.
Ludwig Vakulik, who was a really important voice for reform, he just laid it out there. He's saying, look, for 20 years, nothing has gotten better for ordinary people. And it was more than just that. It was a feeling that their country had lost its way, lost its pride. A huge piece of the puzzle was the leadership. People were just fed up. They saw the hard-line, old-school communist government as totally corrupt and, frankly, not very good at its job. The economy was a mess, life was tough, and it felt like the only people doing well were the ones at the very top. And here's where things take a really radical turn. Thinkers like Luboš Dobrovský started asking a much bigger, much more dangerous question. They said, hang on, maybe it's not just about having bad leaders. What if the whole theory of communism is flawed? That was a massive step to take. Okay, so with all this frustration brewing, the stage was set for someone new. And that someone was Alexander Dubček. He came in with this bold, revolutionary idea that captured everyone's imagination. His big idea was called socialism with a human face. And this part is absolutely key. He wasn't trying to destroy communism. He wanted to fix it, to give it a human face. The idea was to create a version that was more liberal and actually popular with the people, all while staying a communist country. And this wasn't just talk. Real changes started happening during this period we now call the Prague Spring. All of a sudden, newspapers could actually criticize the government. People could speak their minds more freely. The terrifying secret police were reined in, and they even started talking about maybe, just maybe, allowing other political parties. It was like a breath of fresh air after 20 years of suffocation. But you can probably guess, while people in Prague were feeling hopeful for the first time in a generation, the phones in Moscow were ringing off the hook. The Kremlin saw this new freedom as a massive threat to its power. And things moved so fast. I mean, look at this timeline. The reforms kick off in April. By July, the Soviets are leaning on Dubček hard, telling him to back off. He tries to compromise, but won't scrap his vision. And then, just a month later, boom, August 20th. The tanks roll in. The dream was over. So why the brutal crackdown? Well, for the Soviet leader Brezhnev, it was all about the domino effect. If Czechoslovakia gets away with this, who's next? Poland? Hungary? He was terrified of losing his grip on Eastern Europe. Plus, he was getting a ton of pressure from other communist leaders who were scared this freedom virus might spread. Now, this is just fascinating. Check out the two different stories being told. On the one hand, Prague radio is reporting what's actually happening. It's an invasion, a hostile act. But on the other hand, the official Soviet news agency is pushing this completely different narrative, that they were invited in to help fight off so-called counter-revolutionaries. It's pure Cold War propaganda 101. So the tanks rolled in, and the Prague Spring was crushed. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, what came next would define Soviet policy for the next 2 decades. There was this incredible cartoon that went around, and it just perfectly captured how people felt. It showed a Soviet soldier. In 1945, he's being handed flowers, hailed as a hero who liberated them from the Nazis. But in 1968, the same soldier is being met with angry clenched fists. He's an occupier. For a lot of people, that image said it all. To make it official and to warn anyone else who might get any bright ideas, Moscow announced something called the Brezhnev Doctrine. You really, really need to remember this term. It basically gave the Soviet Union the right to invade any of its satellite states if it felt that communism was under threat there. So what did that mean, really? It boiled down to 2 simple, non-negotiable rules for everyone in the Eastern Bloc. Number 1, you will have a one-party communist state. Number 2, you will stay in our military alliance, the Warsaw Pact. No exceptions. The message couldn't have been clearer. Step out of line, and we'll send in the tanks. So in the short term, yes, the Prague Spring was crushed. But it also showed the whole world the brutal reality of Soviet control. It lit a fire in a generation of dissidents. Which leaves us with a really big question to think about. Was it a failure? Or was the Prague Spring the first major crack in the armor, a crack that would eventually shatter the entire Soviet system 2 decades later?